hoping to make heads or tails of a shocking quarterback scenario coming out of week number 7 is a guy who's been covering the Indianapolis Colts for quite some time after spending several years, 7 years at the Indianapolis Star, now covering the Indianapolis Colts for The Athletic. On the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line is Zak Keefer. How you doing, Zach?
I'm good, Rich. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for answering our call to help make heads or tails out of this wild coin flip that happened. Why is this quarterback changing of the guard happening in Indianapolis, Zach?
Because they can't figure this position out. And if I'll be completely honest, they haven't figured this out for 5 years. You guys know what happened in 2019, and Andrew Luck retired, and this is just another chapter in the cycle, and this is where they are in the spot they're in. And to be honest, this move had been coming for a couple of weeks. This was not something, I don't care what they say publicly, this was not something that was just made Monday morning. This was a reflection of this team's displeasure with Matt Ryan over the last couple of weeks and really since the start of the season. Look, they love Matt Ryan, and it's easy to see why. He's really been the leader that they need, but you've got to win games and you've got to stop turning the football over, and they were just so inconsistent at quarterback. We're talking 24 sacks. That's on the offensive line, but the most turnovers in the league from Matt Ryan, the most interceptions. It's just been a mess. And so this was a collective decision, and the owner, Jim Irsay, had his say in this one, just like he did last time when they kicked Carson Wentz out of time. This was Irsay saying it's time to make a move, and they really want to see what they have in Sam Ehlinger.
So Ryan being sacked as much as he's been sacked, that don't you think that has something to do with turnovers and fumbles and rushed passes potentially? I mean, I haven't watched every single snap of Colts football this year, as I'm sure you have. Walk me through the parsing of blame on this front.
Yeah, it's a situation where both things are true, right? I'm going to give you some of these numbers, and they're really ugly. They're really, really ugly. 80 quarterback hits, the most in the league, 110 pressures, that's the third most, and 24 sacks. 24 sacks is more sacks than they gave up in 17 games on Carson Wentz last year. So that's completely on the offensive line, and Matt's done just about everything he can to avoid them. He's a tough dude. He's taken some shots, and he's gotten back up. But what he hasn't done is helped himself. And so it's not an either or, it's a both and. Both are guilty. Like, the quarterback hasn't overcome the problems. But here's the interesting thing, Rich. Frank Reich yesterday said, I need to be crystal clear about this. I told Matt on Monday morning when they made the move that we failed you. We didn't deliver. When they made this trade in the spring, this made a lot of sense, right? Matt Ryan comes in. He makes the smart throws. He plays behind a great offensive line with Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith and Ryan Kelly. And he's got a great running back, right? JT, Jonathan Taylor, 1,800 yards last year. On paper, it made a lot of sense. But what Frank Reich told Matt Ryan yesterday, we didn't deliver. And Matt Ryan didn't either, but it's impossible to put this move in context without explaining how much this offensive line has regressed in the last year. It's staggering, and it's really hard to figure out why.
It is, and I'll tell you what, Zak Keefer, The Athletic, covering the Colts here on the Rich Eisen Show. I picked the Colts to win the division because of exactly what you laid out right there. You put Matt Ryan and his decision-making skills behind an offensive line, maybe the best he's ever played behind. You know, I mean, that has been the staple of the Colts since Chris Ballard has come aboard, despite the changing of the veteran quarterback guard, that the offensive line up front has been terrific. And that game against the Broncos, I mean, at one point, poor Bernard Ryman, out of Central Michigan, I mean, the holding calls and the pre-snap penalty calls on him. It was it was one of those want-to-get-away commercial type first halves for him. So what has happened to this offensive line, Zach?
You know, it's funny. I think they were emboldened by the success they had with Phillip Rivers a couple of years ago. They were the best offensive line in the league that year. I think they allowed 20 sacks the entire season. Part of that is Rivers' ability to get the ball out. And then they go get Carson Wentz last year. And Carson didn't get enough credit for this, but he avoided sacks all year long because he's a big athletic guy. Ryan's not able to do that, but that doesn't answer your question. What does is the fact that Quentin Nelson has regressed, and if you watch the tape, you can see it. Ryan Kelly has regressed. If you watch the tape, same thing. Braden Smith, their right tackle, they're on their fifth different combination on the offensive line, and we're 7 games in, which tells me they don't know what the heck they're doing. They don't have the answers. And the fact that they don't have a star quarterback and they don't have a guy who's going to overcome that. Now, they used to, but he retired. It just spells disaster. And like you said, in that Broncos game, there was a point when Matt Ryan just lost it and started screaming because every single time he touched the football, he's got 3 guys in his face. So, to be honest, it's not a surprise that Matt Ryan is dealing with a grade 2 shoulder separation right now. I'm surprised this didn't happen a couple weeks ago because this is the most expensive offensive line in the league. That's another part of this. We're talking 3 top 2-round picks, including 2 first-rounders in Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson. The most expensive offensive line in the league is playing like the worst offensive line in the league. And I don't care who you have at quarterback, unless it's maybe Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, no quarterback is going to overcome that much pressure every single down. And that's, in that regard, that's where they have failed Matt Ryan.
Zak Keefer of The Athletic covers the Colts right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's still linger on the decision before we turn the pages to what happens now. You said a collective, Irsay and Chris Ballard, and you mentioned Jim Irsay. That's now, it seems like 2 times Irsay has asserted himself. The departure of Wentz, I mean, he was very vocal and placing the mess in Jacksonville and what happened in December and January last year right on the lap of Carson Wentz walking out the door. And you said he had a say in this decision with Matt Ryan being benched. What is he running the show? Is he doing that right now? What do you got for me on that front, Zach?
He runs the show when he wants to run the show. Now, he doesn't intrude on personnel decisions very often, but when it comes to the quarterback, he makes an exception. And you're dead on. He called Ballard and Reich into his office the night of that game last year in Week 17 and said, under no circumstances will Carson Wentz return as the quarterback of this team. It's your job to find a solution. And remember, they traded Carson Wentz without having a solution. Matt Ryan was not on the doorstep. A lot of people didn't even know he was available. And they thought that Matt Ryan would be the solution. And this is the second time when Irsay's had an input. And honestly, Frank Reich's seat is getting warmer. It is really getting warmer. And, you know, it's tough to judge a coach who's had 5 different starting quarterbacks in 5 years. That's got to be unprecedented. But now we're on to 6, right, with Sam Ehlinger. And this is a tough spot to be because in a lot of ways this team is built to compete right now. A lot of people picked them to win the AFC South. I'm not going to go further than compete because they're a mess. But it's going to be up and down with Sam Ehlinger. Let's not call it anything like it's not because it's going to be some good and it's going to be some bad. He's a young quarterback without an elite arm. He's going to take his lumps. But the reality is Matt Ryan probably gives you a better chance to win in the short term, but they need to find out what they have in Sam Ehlinger. And that's probably going to, you know, get them a better draft pick in the spring. And honestly, the mood around town right now is enough of this garage sale at quarterback, enough of this trying to run on the QB carousel and find a new guy every single year. It's time to go find one in the draft. The problem is they have 10 games left, and it's going to be a lot harder to win those games with a young quarterback who's never thrown an NFL pass.
Well, and I guess that's a perfect segue to talk about what's next, because if you're saying that the seat for Frank Reich is getting warmer, if I'm a coach and my seat's getting warmer, then I'm going to go with a system and with a game plan that I know best and the one that got me to this spot with all, you know, outside of Josh McDaniels, you know, leaving the altar at the last second. I'm going to go with the game plan that got me to this spot, and that's the RPO game, and that is clearly what Sam Ehlinger does very well. And look who's the backup of all people. It's Nick Foles. So have we, like, is that what we're going to see? We're going to see a lot of the RPOs. We're going to see Sam at the mesh point with Jonathan Taylor and Himes and everyone else. Is that what we got going on right now, you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I'm a little anxious to see what it looks like because, you know, this is a team that was built to win from the pocket with Matt Ryan. That was the entire offense. And the guy can't move because he's got 3 guys in his face. Now, Sam Ehlinger, there's some spunk to him. Like, he's made some plays, and I want to be very clear. He made some plays in the preseason against second and third teamers, and that's not the same thing as doing it on Sundays in Week 8. So it's going to be interesting to see, but they're going to run some boots. They're going to run some naked. They're going to move him around. And I think you're right. I think you're onto something. The sad part in all of this is the Colts have one of the very best players in football who has largely been a non-factor the entire season, like Jonathan Taylor. How is a team with Jonathan Taylor on its roster ranked 30th in the league in rushing? And it's not just because he missed 2 games due to injury. It's because he's been bottled up because there's nowhere to go. And I think what Sam can do, if Sam can pick up some third downs with his legs and kind of move laterally in the pocket and basically pressure the defense in different spots, I think that might open up a little bit more in the run game, because I've never seen a guy make more 3-yard runs, 8-yard runs, right? Like JT has nowhere to go. And I think a lot of that is because the defenses know the Colts cannot push the ball down the field. Maybe Ehlinger gives them another wrinkle, but at this point, they'll take anything they can get because this offense is just a mess right now.
So the fact that Foles is 2 right now might be because of that grade 2 shoulder issue that Ryan has. Is your best estimate that Matt Ryan's taking his last snap as a Colts quarterback, barring injury, of everyone else right now?
Yeah, that's the reality. And honestly, I think that's tough for a lot of people to swallow, especially in Atlanta, because that was sort of the vibe was, man, if this guy just had a better line, he could still play. And we didn't really see a lot of signs of decline in training camp from Matt Ryan. But if you watch the games every week, I mean, the 2 interceptions on Sunday in Tennessee were just inexcusable. So barring injury, Matt Ryan won't throw another pass for the Colts this season. And it was made very clear yesterday, this is Sam Ehlinger's team for the rest of this season.
Wow. I got 2 more for you, Zak Keefer, the Colts reporter and insider for The Athletic. The Washington Commanders are coming in. I'm very familiar with Lucas Oil Stadium, having been there every single year for the Combine for the last 2 decades. But maybe you might be able to help me here. Are there porta potties that they could stick Dan Snyder to watch the game? Is that the game plan? Best you can tell, they're going to stick Dan Snyder by the.
How fun is this one going to be? I
right.
mean, you've got the Jim Irsay versus Daniel Snyder storyline. I'm kind of disappointed we don't have the Carson Wentz storyline because
can't have it all. Can't have it all, Zach. Can't have it all.
We do have Tyler Heineke and Sam Ehlinger. So
you do have that.
Who's not going to turn into that?
What are you hearing about why Irsay said what he said at the owners' gathering a couple weeks ago, and whether this is going to continue? What are you hearing about that, Zach?
The one thing about Jim Irsay that a lot of people in Indianapolis know that maybe not a lot know around the country is that he does not care about blowback. If you guys paid attention to what he said about Carson Wentz in the offseason, those were things that I reported early in the offseason and took a lot of flack for. And then Jim Irsay basically came out and said everything in terms of why they made the move. And I don't think I've ever heard an owner just so publicly criticize a former player like that. He doesn't care about the blowbacks for better or for worse. And honestly, I think what he said is what a lot of owners think. So I think a little bit of credit goes to him for having the guts to say it publicly when a lot of people won't. But, yeah, I really do wonder where Daniel Snyder's seat is come Sunday afternoon at Lucas Oil Stadium.
And, in having you on for the first time, Zach, we hit the Google machine, I'm not going to lie, to know your bio and your history. And I'm kind of with a bit of trepidation asking this about anything that's on Google, but I do have to ask you, one of the attributes of your 7+ years at the Star in covering the team that's highlighted here is you've written about Pat McAfee's poker skills. I'll bite. What do you got for me on that, Zach?
Oh, we could go on for a long time.
What do you got?
Pat McAfee, you know him, I know him, everybody knows him because of one hand of poker. I'll keep it real short.
Go for it.
This is a pretty epic story, and I wrote this story years ago at the Star, but basically he was this no-name high school punter who went with a friend to a poker game in Pittsburgh one night, this shady, seedy basement, and he took $100 and he turned it into $1,200 in one night.
Of course he did.
Pocket Jacks won him all the money.
Pocket Jacks.
He used that money to go to a kicking camp the next day. He lied to his parents, told him he was spending the night at his friends, took that money he won at the poker game, went to a kicking camp, was noticed by a college recruiter from West Virginia. 2 days later, had an offer from the school. That sounds like fiction, but I promise you that's exactly how it happened. And one of the more memorable stories I've written. Ask Pat about it sometimes. It's all true.
Well, we've definitely had him on right years ago, and about sometimes him not being completely straightforward about his skill set. To get where he is. I believe everything about Pat, and so my response shouldn't be construed that I think he's not telling the complete truth. But the most unbelievable part of that story is winning a poker hand with pocket jacks. That's ridiculous. I don't know how many times I've
one's ever won.
I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of a hand to use to bankroll everything.
I said, how did you become an NFL punter? And he said, it's a really long story. And then he told me the story, and he couldn't remember the hand.
The best.
And then an hour later, he said it was pocket jacks. So there you go.
Jacks. There you go. All right, last one for you, Zach. I know I keep saying that, but this is the fact. With everything going on, and you mentioned how the quarterback situation has just been churning and churning and churning ever since that day in preseason when my buddy Adam Schefter came out and said during a preseason game that Andrew Luck was going to retire. And he was standing right there on the sideline, fully intending to retire, but not having it come out in the middle of a preseason game. Everything going on and on and on about this quarterback scenario. Any reporting, any whiff that the Colts have ever called up Andrew Luck to just kick the tires and say, you're sure you're done? Anytime. What do you got?
Yeah, they have. This is a little shameless plug, but I put together a podcast series this summer for The Athletic, 6 episodes, that basically explored the entire question of what happened to Andrew Luck. How did one of the greatest quarterbacks prospects of all time, maybe since John Elway or Peyton Manning, walk away from the game before he was 30 years old? And there's a lot to it, and uncovered a lot of old interviews with him, and I actually met with him last spring to talk about it. But no, it's not going to happen. He's definitely moved on from football. The Colts have reached out. Absolutely, they've called him. He lived in Indianapolis for the first 3 years after he retired. He was a mile from the Colts practice facility, and very much the specter of Andrew Luck still hovers over this team because of what you just asked, Rich. I mean, this has been a 4 to 5 year carousel. I mean, they have just tried to go with these short-term stopgaps, and it hasn't worked. And until they find the next guy, you're always left with that what if. I mean, I met with Andrew, and I couldn't stop thinking, this guy's only 32 years old. Like, he could still play. He's not going to, but 32 is not that old with the way quarterbacks are playing into their late 30s and 40s right now. So, yeah, they've reached out, but he has moved on.
Doors closed, but the door's now open for you here on this program. Great chat, Zach. You made me smarter, and I was fascinated the whole way. Look for more of my phone calls. Really appreciate it, sir.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, Rich.
Right back at you. Zak Keefer, right here on the Rich Eisen Show, at Z Keefer, Keefer on Twitter. He's about to get a follow from me. That was very informative, and I appreciated that entire conversation. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.